Precision medicine is personalized medicine. And in biologic therapies, getting personal means getting to know patients at the genomic level. I'm Matt Pillar, and this is the Business of Biotech. On today's show, precision medicine is precisely what we're talking about with Shawn Leland, PharmD, a young founder and CEO doing exciting things with precision oncology therapeutics at Elevation Oncology. A little bit about Shawn. After earning his PharmD from Albany College of Pharmacy and Health Sciences, Dr. Leland's profession took him all over the health sciences career map, from doing clinical management work at Albany Medical Center and Pfizer, to oncology research at Roswell Park Cancer Institute, to retail pharmacy work, to a postdoctoral fellowship and teaching stint at Rutgers Ernesto Mario School of Pharmacy. And then back to the business side of things, doing R&D at Eli Lilly and working on oncology at Ariad Pharmaceuticals. Before founding Elevation in 2019, he even spent a few years doing business development at Argos Therapeutics and Veristem, and consulting at Catenion. Shawn, welcome to the show.
Thanks, Matt. Yeah, pleasure to be here today.
It's my pleasure to have you. And, I wanted to chat with you about this because your multifaceted experience certainly lends itself to leadership of a biopharma company. And it's particularly interesting to me to look at the places your career has taken you already. I mean, you're young, came out of Albany in what, 2008?
Yep, 2008.
Yeah. So in that short period of time, you've done a whole bunch of stuff. And it's very interesting to me because I know ACPHS President Greg Dewey. Dr. Dewey and I have spoken multiple times. I've written about him, and I've written specifically about his intentions to broaden the curriculum there at ACPHS to create opportunities for PharmDs beyond retail pharmacy. You were a retail pharmacist for less than a year. It's like this little blip on your radar.
Yep.
So it occurred to me that if Dr. Dewey hasn't had you back on campus as a guest lecturer like multiple times yet, I anticipate that he will be very, very soon. So keep your eyes out for that. It's only a matter of time. But what was your worldview coming out of ACPHS with that PharmD degree? And it's okay if you didn't have a definitive plan, but what was sort of the plan coming out?
Yeah, no, my plan coming out of pharmacy school was I thought I was on a path to being a clinical pharmacist. That was kind of my focus. I really had this, strong passion for cardiovascular disease, diabetes, critical care. That was largely stimulated by some of the, health challenges that I saw my dad deal with, starting kind of my senior year of high school and beyond that, dealing with diabetes, dealing with heart disease. So that was kind of an area where, I wanted to, focus my education and then my professional career upon. It was really up until my, last year at pharmacy school when I was doing my, clerkship rotations, where the first rotation I went on was, an oncology rotation at Roswell Park Cancer Institute, where my career quickly changed from, wanting to do something in cardiovascular disease, diabetes, critical care to, wanting to help patients with cancer. I thought, in pharmacy school that I'm like, oh, everything is based upon what's in the textbook. And, you treat patients that way. And I quickly realized that, it's not only just treating patients with standard of care therapy, but it's also, exposing them to research and clinical trials and being a part of, innovation and advancing the field of medicine. And, where that was moving the quickest, at the time, and I would say even currently today, is within the field of oncology. So I quickly found myself being immersed in clinical trials, and that really stimulated kind of my passion for research and the field of oncology drug development. The second rotation I did, and this is something that, was not emphasized. I didn't even, really realize that this was a career path forward, when I was going through pharmacy school. I thought there was two tracks. There was the retail path, and then there was the hospital clinical pharmacy path. Like those are really kind of the only, two paths that I was aware of at the time. And my second rotation found me at Pfizer, working hand in hand with the medical science liaison. And I realized, being able to combine kind of science and business was really where my kind of like true passion was. So this ability to, work for a pharmaceutical biotech company also came into play, kind of during my clerkship rotations early on. And, that took me into, going to, the ASHP annual convention where you apply for, pharmacy residencies and pharmacy fellowship programs, where I thought I would be going in and applying for, a residency program, doing clinical pharmacy. I found myself quickly change paths, and I found myself applying for, pharmaceutical industry fellowship programs in the field of oncology. So, all of that transpired over a very short period of time, basically, over a course of 15 weeks of, doing those first, two pharmacy clerkship rotations, in addition to, spending time and doing some research at Roswell Park, where I had a clerkship rotation off in between, Roswell Park and Pfizer.
Yeah, very cool. Your Roswell Park time, was that spent in Buffalo?
Yes.
Yeah, I grew up in Hamburg, New York, just a little bit south of Buffalo.
Yeah.
I'm a Buffalo guy. This for, I don't know where you ended up on the football spectrum, Dr. Leland, but this episode will air several weeks from today. But tonight, the Buffalo Bills are preparing for, Monday Night Football. So I don't know if you'll be tuning into that.
Yeah, it'll be a big game. Yeah, no, excited for the Bills game. Watched a lot of football this weekend. We caught the Bears game against the Packers,
Yeah.
and the Steelers Seahawks game in overtime with the Steelers win is really where my heart resides.
Okay. All right. Good. Yeah, for sure. We watched some of that too. Yeah. So Roswell Park's a great place to be as far as the study of oncology goes. I went to UB, another pretty good pharmacy school in its own right. Right. So common connections there. At what point did you decide or even start thinking about entrepreneurship? I mean, this is so, as I said, there's an excellent base in your CV to set you up for, hey, I've got a lot of experience from every facet of running a business in life sciences, and specifically around development of drugs. But it's a whole other step to say, let's raise some money and start a company.
Yeah. So for me, I mean, like, I think I had touched pieces of this, probably early on in my career. I mean, I think part of this is kind of a key component to doing business development. So, after I spent the first, year and a half of my career at Eli Lilly, doing oncology research and development, and then I got pulled into working in oncology search and evaluation hand in hand with the oncology leadership team, scouting assets for licensing and companies for mergers and acquisitions. Very cross-functional role, very technical role, performing due diligence on a variety of different assets, and, making formal recommendations to the oncology leadership team at Lilly, to guide which products we would in-license and which companies we would go out and pursue for mergers, acquisitions. And, I think that got me thinking in that entrepreneurial direction. After I left Lilly and went to Ariad, working closely with, researchers, clinicians in the field, I feel like you come across good ideas all the time. It's just a question of, do you have the gestalt to take it to that next level and say, this is a really good idea. No one's out there doing this. I'm going to, become an expert on this, topic, this target, this drug. And I'm going to go out and try to pitch this idea to investors, raise money around it, and put a company in place. That took some time. I think when I was 27, I came across an idea and concept that I saw another individual take the same idea and concept that I had come across, 6 to 12 months later, and turn that into, something really special that helped a lot of patients. And I think once you see one of those go by, you are a lot more likely to pursue this and go down this path. So, the opportunity to execute on something like this came across, kind of my plate in November of 2018, which is where I came across this idea of, forming Elevation Oncology. I was sitting in a, scientific presentation at a conference in Munich, and, Alex Drillen from Memorial Sloan Kettering, who's a, world-known precision oncology physician and medical oncologist in New York, he was presenting on this concept of targeted therapies in lung cancer. And he had one slide on this target called neuregulin-1 or NRG1 gene fusions, and was a target I had never seen before. I actually knew nothing about the target, but listening to him describe the target and some of the unique features of the biology, the fact that it was rare, the fact that they had identified it in multiple types of cancer, and it was a genomic marker there that carried that hallmark of being a true oncogenic driver, and that it was predominantly mutually exclusive of other known oncogenic driver targets, highlighting the fact that if you could identify it with genomic testing, it was the one and only thing driving tumor growth and proliferation, and ideally should be amenable to a targeted therapy approach with a monotherapy. And on that same slide, he presented the biology. He also presented a case study highlighting the fact that you could drug this target using a monoclonal antibody approach that other companies had developed. But other companies developed this for broad patient populations, different types of cancer, but not selected based upon a genomic marker that would increase your probability of success of having a positive clinical trial outcome. And based upon work that others have done in the field of precision medicine, I was able to come up with this concept to where we did a ton of research. We looked extensively at this target, pulled together a pitch deck, got out there, started pitching this idea to investors. And then, lo and behold, after pitching this idea to investors, running diligence on a variety of different programs against this target, that led to the formation of Elevation Oncology on July 12th of 2019, where, that morning we closed a Series A financing of $32.5 million. And then later that afternoon, we closed an asset purchase agreement with Merrimack Pharmaceuticals to acquire seribantumab, which we are now developing for patients with solid tumors with, neuregulin-1 or NRG1 gene fusions.
So when you, when the brainchild sort of came together, take us back, were you, I guess, was the intent to develop a company that was going to build itself around genomic diagnostic, genomic testing, or was it the intent to build a company around a therapeutic candidate that took advantage of these things, or both? Like what was sort of the original intention of the company?
Yeah, the original intention of the company was really to, cater to, any type of cancer, that's genomically defined.
Mm-hmm.
It's just really kind of the, first proof of concept for us, was using seribantumab to target these patients with NRG1 gene fusion. So, the idea here is to go broad. We want to help a lot of patients with cancer. The idea here isn't to just help one genomically defined patient population. And we started to build, kind of a platform technology, based upon kind of the operational infrastructure that we put in place that we believe, takes precision medicine to the next level, and being able to develop drugs, not only just in a timely manner, but also in a very capital efficient manner by, putting in place, very specific operational infrastructure that allows us to do that.
Okay. When you're talking about, when you use the words precision medicine, in your worldview, in the context of what you're doing, are we saying precision medicine is, that medicine which is developed and defined by certain genomic markers? Like, is that where precision medicine lies, as far as your definition is concerned?
Yeah, correct. Yeah, I mean, you're spot on, Matt. I mean, I think what we look for is, patients that have undergone genomic sequencing, that genomic sequencing shows a specific genomic alteration, and then figuring out, based upon the biology associated with that genomic alteration, is it amenable to being drugged with a therapeutic approach.
Mm-hmm.
To me, it comes down to kind of like three things. First of all, you need to, find the right physician. I think people, when they're diagnosed with cancer, the immediate instinct is to just go to the community oncologist right down the street, the closest person. That's not necessarily always the best option. The community oncologist is seeing, hundreds of patients. They are seeing all different types of tumors. And if you're looking for someone who is specialized and focused on the type of cancer, if you're looking for, options for, clinical trials in addition to standard of care, you really need to do your homework and figure out, who's offering cutting edge technology, what different clinical trials out there. It's not always just about, you're diagnosed with this type of cancer and we're just going to treat you with chemotherapy or chemoimmunotherapy or immunotherapy alone. We really need to kind of take that to the next level. And that starts with, the treating oncologist. To me, the next key step is, making sure you're getting genomic testing. If you don't get tested, you don't know what is driving your cancer. And, rather than just being exposed to chemotherapy or chemoimmunotherapy or immunotherapy alone, which is not going to be specific to your type of cancer, it's not only going to be toxic to your cancer cells, but it's also going to be toxic to normal healthy cells, which is where you get, toxicity and safety challenges. And those are the things that really start to, debilitate, patients' lives and their quality of life and impact their day to day. The idea here is to understand at the root what is causing your cancer and figuring out if we can tailor a therapeutic to that, that's going to result in, anti-tumor efficacy, but also have a much more favorable safety profile, which will lead to improved quality of life for that patient.
Yeah. Yeah, I've talked about it before on this show. My dad has suffered some health problems of late. The last couple of years, he's had in fact bladder cancer, and we went the same route. Local oncologist for a little while before I convinced him to seek specialized care. Again, drawing some connections down in Pittsburgh, a couple hours south of where we live. Shout out to Dr. Benjamin Davies once again for his excellent work down there. But to your point, I mean, these are the things that, we're responsible for doing, seeking the best care for the conditions that we have. Now, as it relates to genomic testing, what advances are driving what you guys are doing as far as biological therapy development is concerned? What advances in genomic testing and accessibility to that is kind of an enabling factor in that?
Yeah. No, the field of technology and genomic testing has moved forward quite a bit. I think, people just even use the term genomic testing as a standard term that I feel like everyone should understand, right? Genomic testing can mean a variety of things. There's different types of genomic testing. All of these things are important to also understand because not all genomic testing is created equal. For the lead target that we're taking a look at as it relates to NRG1, this genomic alteration it's a fusion protein. You basically have one protein fused with another protein. Not to go too deep into the science, but these are very large proteins which pose limitations for certain types of genomic sequencing that make them tough to find. So currently the vast majority of genomic testing companies are using what's called DNA-based, next generation sequencing techniques, which, for picking up oncogenic fusion proteins like NRG1 are not the optimal tests to utilize. They carry about a 33% sensitivity. So they can detect these fusion proteins, but it's at a very low sensitivity, and they actually miss 2 out of every 3. So they're only capturing 33%. If you're looking for a oncogenic fusion protein like NRG1, you actually need to utilize RNA-based NGS testing, which has a much higher sensitivity for picking up these larger protein regions or these large intronic regions, where they carry north of a 90% sensitivity. So you're actually capturing 9 out of every 10. You're only missing 1 out of every 10. So, I mean, you can even see with this, movement away from DNA-based NGS testing to RNA-based NGS testing, there's a dramatic increase in sensitivity. And, that's, an additional 8 patients that you can identify with RNA-based NGS, whereas if you're using DNA-based NGS, you're missing 2 out of every 3 of those patients. So, I think it's not only important to get your tumor sequenced, but it's also important to make sure that you're talking to your doctor about what are my options for genomic testing, and understanding based upon those options, which one is the most sensitive for picking up a variety of different genomic alterations.
The Business of Biotech is brought to you in partnership with Cytiva. Together, we're committed to helping the leaders of new and emerging biopharma companies navigate the financial, organizational, human resources, and regulatory waters you'll encounter on your way from discovery to the clinic and beyond. Check out a host of useful resources for biotech leaders at Cytiva's Emerging Biotech Accelerator at cytivalifesciences.com/emerging biotech. That's CYTIVA lifesciences.com/emerging biotech. Yeah. This is a source of, internal conflict for me from a Business of Biotech standpoint around precision medicine and the limitations of the market that you're addressing,
Yep.
right? Like there's inherent conflict there. Am I right? Like from a business perspective, you go out and you're looking for financing, for instance, you're looking for investments. Well, what do? We create precision medicine. Ooh, that sounds sexy. What's that all about? Well, we identify a very finite percent of the population suffering from a very rare disease, and we intend to address that and make them feel better. Well, there's an inherent market limitation there. So how do you go about reconciling that with the formation and go forward plan of your business?
Yeah, no. So I think you just have to be, more creative with how you develop the drugs. You need to do that in order to, have a similar return on investment. You need to think about doing drug development differently. You can't just do drug development the same way that every other company has done drug development in the past. You need to pay close attention to changes in the regulatory landscape and environment to understand, how is the, FDA and other regulatory agencies, contributing to more expedited development paths and strategy to being able to cater to even rare genomically defined patient populations. So, whether that's, in the past, when you think about oncology drug development, it's very simple. You develop a drug in a very broad patient population. And, in order to get that drug registered, you typically develop it in, one type of cancer: lung cancer, breast cancer, ovarian cancer. That's the development path to registration. I think, in order to make something, commercially attractive or attractive from a business standpoint in a rare genomically defined patient population, you have to be creative. You have to partner and collaborate with diagnostic companies to find these patients. This notion of being able to just do it by yourself is not the way forward. It's not the way that we're going to advance precision medicine. So it's all about partnership and collaboration. It's partnership and collaboration with diagnostic companies and pharmaceutical and biotech companies. It's collaboration with patient advocacy groups that know where these patients are. They seem to come out of the woodwork. It's crazy how these things all transpire. And it's also being creative around the drug development strategy. Just developing in one type of cancer may not be a profitable path forward, but if I can develop in all types of cancer and do one clinical trial in a tumor agnostic development strategy, because I'm selecting just the patients with the genomically defined alteration, then I can run one clinical trial and I can get a broad indication with regulatory agencies to where I'm just running one clinical trial rather than, running one clinical trial in one specific tumor type to get it approved in kind of all patients. So, I think again, like it's just about it's partnership, collaboration. It's being creative with your development strategy to do things in a time and a cost efficient manner.
Yeah, development and clinical strategy. So the clinical strategy, is that something that's pretty novel? Or
Yeah, so there are now, there's now 4 FDA approved therapies that have pursued, tumor agnostic development strategies in genomically defined patient populations. So I think, it's fairly cutting edge, but it's not like you're, setting a new precedence and you're the first company out there doing this. There is a, clear regulatory precedence now for this tumor agnostic development strategy where you run, essentially one clinical trial in this genomically defined patient population across all different types of cancer, as opposed to selecting all patients with one type of cancer.
yeah, that's fascinating. You mentioned a few minutes ago, about the folly in attempting to go it alone, the need for partnership. And from what I understand, you guys are working with a number of diagnostic
Yeah.
partners, 9 diagnostic collaborators, if that count still.
Yeah.
So tell us about that. What's that network look like, and what are they doing for you?
Yeah, so there's, we do have the 9 diagnostic partnerships that are in place. The way that this works is, some of the partnerships that we have in place with diagnostic companies, they are just doing, their standard kind of genomic testing. And basically, if they identify a patient with a genomic alteration of therapeutic interest to elevation, basically what they do is they, notify us, they notify the treating oncologist that there's a potential clinical trial option that's available for their patient. And, then we work collaboratively with that treating medical oncologist to find the nearest clinical trial site for that patient. The aspect of the diagnostic partnerships that I think is even more intriguing than that medical oncologist referring a patient out to, a clinical trial site is for that medical oncologist to be able to keep their patient and actually open up an elevation oncology clinical trial at their site. So, there are 3 partnerships that we have in place that are what they're called, just-in-time clinical trial collaboration. So the way that that works is, rather than following the traditional, clinical research organization or CRO based model where, the CRO selects a number of clinical trial sites across the country, you put in contracts, you get regulatory approvals with all of those sites, and you just run your clinical trial at those sites. What we've done is through three of these diagnostic partnerships, we have access to 400 plus clinical trial sites across the country. The way that those work is we've pre-negotiated contract, we've pre-negotiated budget, the study's approved through a central institutional review board or IRB, and that gets all the operational minutia out of the way ahead of time. What we can do in those scenarios with those 400 plus clinical trial sites through 3 of the diagnostic partnerships that we have in place is if and when a patient is identified by any of those 3 diagnostic partnerships, they are immediately notified that there's a clinical trial option for their patient. Given the fact that we've gotten all the operational minutia out of the way, we can activate that clinical trial site within 14 days or less. That allows the doctor to keep their patient. They don't have to refer the patient out. I mean, most medical oncologists would prefer to keep their patient. They don't want to refer them out to the nearest academic center or another community oncology practice, whatever it may be. And it's a win-win for everyone around the table. It allows us to activate those sites in 14 days or less. It allows the patient to get on a clinical trial that's tailored to their genomic alteration. It allows that doctor to keep their patient, which allows for continuity with that patient. And, with us having 400 plus clinical trial sites across the US, it's also very patient friendly because it allows them to find a clinical trial site that's most likely pretty close to where they live, which we believe results in improved quality of life. It allows you to spend more time with family, friends, etc., in a very difficult and challenging time in your life.
Yeah. That's pretty wild. Where does that model come from? Like where's the basis or foundation of that model?
Yeah, so I really had no idea that this model was in place. When I was working at Area Pharmaceuticals, we were doing precision medicine there, and we had kind of toyed with some of these ideas. We had talked about some of these things, but it was very challenging to implement at that time. I mean, diagnostic companies are not what they are today. The innovation associated with medicine wasn't where we needed it to be. And as the field of genomic testing has evolved and moved forward, people have made this a reality, and they've realized that you can't use that traditional CRO based clinical trial model to cater to rare genomically defined patient populations. And like, if you did, I mean, you could do it, but it's going to take you forever to enroll a clinical trial. And it's going to cost you a lot of money, because you're going to end up opening a ton of clinical trial sites because you're trying to find a needle in a haystack. And you're going to be carrying, clinical trial site overhead for each and every one of those sites, whether they do or don't find a patient. Like, that's not capital efficient. I only want to pay sites if you're going to find patients. If you're not going to find patients, why do I want to carry site overhead associated with that? Which is where this just-in-time clinical trial model comes into play, because the only time that you end up carrying site overhead for a site is if and when they identify a patient, and you decide to activate that in that kind of 14-day or less period, and you have the just-in-time activation. Like, it's great. I activate your site when I know you have a patient. We don't have to activate a site unless you actually have a patient. Like, that's capital efficient. That's time efficient.
Yeah. We had we dropped an episode a few weeks ago with Alan Shaw on it's called the Clinical Trials Conundrum, kind of waxing philosophical about everything that's wrong with the clinical trials paradigm today. So this is it's innovative, but innovation's also scary, sometimes clunky, sometimes challenging. So what sort of, as you embrace that approach, what sort of, I don't know, maybe regulatory or regulatory challenges, skepticism, around kind of bucking the status quo and doing something different as clinical trials go. What sort of challenges did you face?
Yeah, I mean, I think, especially when you have 9 diagnostic partnerships in place, you're working with a variety of different companies, and, each one of these companies have a different way in terms of how they want to do things as well, right? Each company, they know what the rules are that they follow, but there are also certain companies that are much more conservative than others, right? There are legal groups that are like, you can do this, but we wouldn't recommend that you do this, or you can do it, but you have to kind of stay within these guardrails. So there's a certain area of kind of like what's finite, and then also kind of like a gray zone where you can operate in, as it relates to innovation. So I think, you have to be kind of very careful with these things. You obviously have to follow, regulatory and compliance guidelines, but we also need to make sure that there's, room for innovation here. So I think, we've kind of realized, some of the pros and cons to working. And, I think we're working collaboratively with these diagnostic companies to try to figure out, a compliant, from both the regulatory and from a quality standpoint, to make sure that we're able to bring innovation to these patients.
Yeah. When you following this model, I mean, the very model of the company addressing the genomic alteration as opposed to specific indications, does that open up your patient recruitment opportunities? Does it actually sort of relieve a burden as far as clinical recruitment is concerned, or does it make it more? I mean, I imagine it makes it more complex as well in a way.
Yeah. I mean, it makes it more complex because you need more operational infrastructure to manage these partnerships, right? So like, that's the added complexity component. But I mean, I can tell you that it's a way more efficient model, right? I mean, there's way more diagnostic companies looking for these patients, right? Like without the test, you don't identify these patients, right? It's not like you're treating an all comers. Like if you don't have the genomic alteration, like if you don't have the genomic testing results, you can't identify these patients. They go hand in hand. So the diagnostic companies and partnering with them are key to identify these patients and also to just like the greater precision medicine ecosystem.
Yeah. How does the genomic testing aspect of your approach impact the manufacturing approach? So, and I asked that question because I mean, again, it seems inherent that, you know, if you're looking at precision approaches to very, very specific indications based on genomic markers, you're looking at a lot of complexity in your manufacturing approach, because it's not, you know, hit the button and let it roll, right? It's not a great big giant run of generic therapeutics. So how does that look in your business? Like as you approach, you know, scale up, as you need more supply for clinical trials, as you move into commercial, how does your approach impact your manufacturing scheme?
Yeah. So Matt, I think you're maybe asking two questions, one of which is on the.
I use a lot of words when I ask questions, so there could be 4 questions in there. I don't know. Reflect on my poorly worded question.
I'm gonna break it down into to 2 paths. One of which is the manufacturing path and the relevance on the manufacturing side, and then also, you know, kind of like what needs to be done from a companion diagnostic development, which is more so kind of like the analytical side, and really kind of like what regulatory agencies like the FDA want to see in terms of, you know, when and if you get a drug commercially approved, how are you going to identify these patients? Because you need to have a commercially approved companion diagnostic, or CDX, to identify these patients, in addition to also getting the drug, you know, commercially approved and approved from a regulatory standpoint. So I think that's also kind of a key component here. You know, I think on the manufacturing side, you know, it's very different from elevation than I would say it is for other companies, right? Because, you know, I think when you think of most pharmaceutical biotech companies, you know, they typically have a drug discovery research phase before they go into clinic and do development, right? We jumped, you know, straight into development. So we went from company formation to initiation of a phase 2 study with potential registrational intent via an accelerated approval pathway in 12 months time. You know, a big part of the reason why we were able to do that is, you know, we were able to acquire a product, you know, from another pharmaceutical company where they had developed that product in, you know, over 800 patients. It just wasn't developed in the right genomically defined patient population. And, you know, with that came, you know, drug substance, drug product that was, you know, GMP registration ready. And, you know, we didn't have to do any manufacturing work to initiate our phase 2 clinical trial, because we already had existing drug substance and drug product that was already registration ready GMP. And, you know, for us, you know, what we've done is, you know, given the fact that we're running a registrational trial, you know, we're using the exact same, you know, scale that we inherited from the prior company, you know, so that is kind of in this like autopilot mode that you've outlined. But we are also now in the process of looking at commercial scale up as we de-risk the program, you know, throughout its development cycle, and then also starting to look ahead to, you know, how many patients are out there, what is the commercial opportunity that exists, to figure out and identify what that commercial scale manufacturing looks like. So that's kind of the manufacturing component, and I think, you know, how we think about it. I think the other component here is the companion diagnostic development strategy. So, you know, when you look at the 4 approved tumor agnostic development strategies that were employed by, you know, other companies that have led to FDA approvals of, you know, tumor agnostic development products, you know, everyone has dealt with companion diagnostic registration as a post-marketing commitment. So basically what's happened is there are existing tests that are out there. You know, they are not commercially approved tests, but they are tests that are out there and available, you know, from a research and development standpoint. So, those products have relied on products that are not on tests that are not FDA approved necessarily to identify these patients. And then as part of the post-marketing commitment with regulatory agencies like the FDA, they've then registered that companion diagnostic or test, which is specific to their therapeutic, post the approval of the therapeutic itself. So we are, trying to work collaboratively with diagnostic companies again to accelerate kind of drug development and diagnostic development to, register a companion diagnostic simultaneously with the approval of the therapeutic. But again, if we're not able to do that, there's a clear regulatory precedence that we could do that as a post-marketing commitment as well. So I think, the FDA and other regulatory agencies, understand that development of precision oncology products can be done in a much more expedited manner. And they also understand that you might not be able to cram everything you ideally want into that finite period of time. So they also will work collaboratively for you to do things that they believe are necessary to help identify these patients and address them as a post-marketing commitment, which again, it's really focused on, in order to take precision medicine to the next level, it takes partnership, collaboration, et cetera.
Yeah. You come off as a very cool, very, very chill, relaxed guy, but you're a disruptor, man. You're a disruptor. Do you consider Elevation a disruptive company?
Yeah, I don't know if I would necessarily consider Elevation a disruptive company. I mean, I think, I think we're really just looking to move the field forward, right? I mean, I think we are looking to not necessarily disrupt the field, but, really elevate the field of precision medicine and precision oncology. I think, we want to get people to be more creative and think about doing things differently. I think some would view that as disruptive, but I think all too often, we all
with a positive connotation, Mike.
Yeah.
In a positive way, yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. What's next? I mean, as you were describing the therapeutic itself and the fact that it already sort of moved through the development process. I mean, I don't know what the right adjective would be to describe that. Fortuitous, perhaps, fortunate, we'll say. I don't want to say lucky, but you're a little bit ahead of the game with that. What's next? I mean, what do you do beyond? What are you looking at beyond that?
Yeah, so I mean, we're, I think you've gotten this vibe. I mean, we're looking to, generate an industry-leading precision oncology company at Elevation. We're not looking to just, cater to one genomically defined patient population. We're looking to make, precision oncology therapeutics available to a variety of different genomic alterations. And, I think a lot of companies, again, like to get caught up in this, well, we're an antibody company, or we're a small molecule company, or we're an antibody drug conjugate company. I mean, we believe that depending upon the, different genomic alterations that exist, you may have to work and get comfortable with a variety of different therapeutic modalities. So, we're looking to develop a very, broad expertise to be able to cater to, a variety of different genomic alterations, being able to deliver therapeutic modalities that are optimal for those different types of genomic alterations. So, what we've done, Matt, is we've created, essentially 3 strategic pillars in terms of how we plan and intend to grow the company. The first of which is focused on maximizing the value of our lead program, which is seribantumab. So, that's not only just development in NRG1 gene fusions, where we're running our phase 2 study with potential registrational intent, but also expanding and being able to bring seribantumab to other genomically defined patient populations where the target HER3 is relevant. So, again, we're looking to work collaboratively with, for instance, antibody drug conjugate companies to take seribantumab and attach it to a linker and toxic payload to be able to deliver that toxic payload in a very targeted format, for instance, to cater to patients with HER3 amplified and overexpressed cancers. So that's some work that we recently started working on. The second strategic pillar is really focused on a partnership and collaboration we put in place right before our IPO financing. This is a strategic collaboration with a next generation sequencing company called Caris Life Sciences. We partnered with Caris around identification and target discovery associated with oncogenic fusion and driver mutation targets. So again, genomically defined targets. Caris is a leader in the next generation sequencing space and in genomic testing, where they do whole transcriptome and whole exome sequencing. So when you think about most diagnostic companies, they're typically running a gene panel on, their favorite 3 to roughly 600 genes. And, with Caris doing whole transcriptome and whole exome sequencing, they're sequencing the entire genome. So they're getting access and data analytics on all 22,000 genes. That's a lot of data, even just on one patient. And I mean, Caris has sequenced, over 100,000 patients to date. So that's a very, very large data set. And, the hypothesis going into that partnership was, okay, well, if most diagnostic companies are just doing 300 to 600 gene panels, Caris is doing all 22,000 genes, they probably identified some targets that others have not identified. And I think, now that we have this partnership in place, we know that there's some very interesting and very unique targets. So basically what we're doing with that partnership is we're now taking those targets, going through and prioritizing those targets, figuring out which targets are amenable to existing therapeutics we could license or acquire and accelerate drug development like we did with seribantumab and energy infusions. We're also going through simultaneously and prioritizing targets to take into novel drug discovery campaigns where you would start the whole drug discovery process from scratch. So that's kind of the second pillar. And then the third pillar is, really focused on business development efforts. So traditional licensing, merger acquisition stuff, kind of like leveraging, my knowledge and expertise on the business development side, as well as kind of the business development team that we put in place at Elevation to look at other precision oncology targets and look to license or acquire products that would allow us to accelerate drug development against those targets.
Yeah, well, that ought to keep you busy.
Yeah, it definitely keeps us busy for sure.
As I said from the outside of the conversation, your background and experience certainly contribute or lend themselves to those three pillars and your continued success. I'm super impressed. I mean, if it weren't morally objectionable, I'd be buying your stock right now. I mean, you instill confidence, and I think the progress, the innovation, it's super inspiring and awesome work. And we're way over time here. I feel like we could talk about it for another hour. We'll have to have you back on for an update, Dr. Leland.
Yeah, that sounds great. Yeah, Matt, obviously really appreciate you guys hosting myself and, on behalf of Elevation, thank you guys. And definitely happy to come back and provide periodic updates.
Yeah, well, thank you for entertaining my ill-formed and rambling questions. I thought it was quite insightful and exciting. So, yeah, thanks for joining us. We'll be back in touch to get you back on for round 2.
Sounds great. Thanks, Matt.
So that's Elevation Oncology founder and CEO, Dr. Shawn Leland. I'm Matt Pillar, and this is the Business of Biotech. We're produced by Bioprocess Online in partnership with Cytiva, which also supports new and emerging biotechs with an amazing collection of content and resources at cytivalifesciences.com/emerging biotech. Check that out. Go to bioprocessonline.com to sign up for my newsletter. And if you're enjoying the Business of Biotech, please subscribe wherever you listen to pods. Give us 5 stars, and thanks for listening.